Assalamu alaikum to everybody. I hope that everyone who's joining us from different parts of the world is doing fantastically well. We are also currently in the blessed month of Ramadan. So I want to wish Ramadan Kareem to all of you who may be fasting and to everybody else also. So again, a very warm welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, or whatever it is. Good day, wherever you are joining us from. For those of you who don't know, I'm Dr. Sohaila Chima. I'm the Assistant Dean at the Institute for Population Health at Weill Cornell Medicine in Qatar, and also an Associate Professor in Clinical Population Health Sciences. So thank you so much for joining us for today's session of the Population Health and Wellbeing series. For those of you who attended this in the past, these are our objectives. We discuss contemporary and critical topics which are relevant to healthcare, to medicine, and to population health. We examine evidence-based practices which are germane to public health and patient care. And we also look at opportunities and challenges in the evolving face of healthcare and population health. So just some housekeeping. Your cameras and microphones have been turned off. You can use the Q&A feature to type your questions and comments. You can actually also use the chat feature. If you want to just post a question or comment in the chat, it will also come to us. So please feel free to do that. Questions will be addressed at the end of the session, but please continue to post your questions as you think about them. As you all may know, this is an accredited activity, both by ACCME and by DHP Qatar. So of course, you get what you attended for, and you will be able to basically download your certificates of attendance once you complete the post-activity evaluation. The evaluation should be available in your Cloud CME account by April 24th. And as per the norm, you basically receive an email notification once the evaluation is available in your Cloud CME account. And then once you complete the evaluation, you can automatically download your post-activity certificate. So we have a fantastic topic, today that we are going to be having a discussion on, and it's about celebrating diversity in sports. So of course, inshallah, we are hosting, FIFA 2022 in Qatar. So we're really, really excited, and this really fits in well with FIFA also. And I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Pieter D'Hooghe. He's the Chief Medical Officer at Aspetar Orthopaedic and Sports Medicine Hospital in Qatar. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He specializes in sports traumatology of the lower leg with a focus on the arthroscopic treatment of athletic knee and ankle and foot injuries. He holds a master in sports medicine, a master in tropical medicine, and an MBA in sports management. He's an editor. He's an editor of 8 textbooks on sports injuries of the lower leg, an author on 40+ book chapters. Plus, he has also authored 85+ peer-reviewed academic publications. He is chairman of the ISAQS Young Professionals Task Force and past chairman of the Leg, Ankle, and Foot Committee. He leads an international panel of experts in the field. Additionally, he's also an assistant professor at Weill Cornell Medicine in Qatar, and he's academically involved in orthopedic research and education while delivering lectures worldwide. Currently, he also serves as the senior orthopedic consultant for 7 Champions League football teams in Europe, 1 team in the United States, and 4 teams in Asia. So we can see that Dr. Pieter D'Hooghe has his plate full, and we're really excited that he's been able to take time out from his busy schedule, to do this session today for us. So Dr. D'Hooghe, warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for doing this session today. And over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sohaila. This is Peter. Greetings to everybody all over the world. And what a pleasure to be part of your wonderful population health and well-being series, for which I honorably thank you for the kind invite, and also to Ms. Anand for arranging everything on the sideline. Thank you for the chance to join you. I see that we are with so many people all over the world. How exciting that is. Most of all, I already look forward to the question and answer and to share our experiences. But when we look at public health and sports, we will start this presentation with three major themes. I come from an orthopedic background, and with that, we will also incorporate that afterwards with the diversity aspect, because diversity is much more around race, around sport-specific types of activity, but it incorporates also diversity in the medical field, and all that together should give us a better appreciation on how we can celebrate that. So we want to take it broad, and with that, I would like to extend my big thanks to the Well Cornell academic board members, my colleagues, my friends, my allied health services that all joined today. So let's start with saying, when you want to consider the relation between public health and sports, I would like to invite you to start from two fundamentally opposing viewpoints. On one side, it's obvious that the practice of sports is an important tool in safeguarding health of people and communities all over the world. Now, with that, I need to share with you, and it's a pleasure, the learning objectives, and to mention that I have no disclosure to this discourse. Now, exercise is medicine is the new evidence-based slogan from the emerging world of lifestyle medicine, which Professor Ravinder Mamtani and his Well Cornell team are at the forefront of in the world. But on the other side, it is as obvious that the practice of sports can lead to serious and sometimes even fatal incidents. And at the start of this discourse, I personally remain doubtful. Should we encourage our society to engage in sports practices in an attempt to improve overall health, or should we advise our society from young to old to abstain from sports practice, having in mind its intrinsic dangers and negative effects? Is there any evidence or research out there that can shed a balanced light on this challenge? I invite you to join me to have a closer look, but I can already tell you that the final answer will contain nuances, that the answer is not black or white, not pro or contra, but in the interest of public health and the celebration of its diversity. Now, let's start our approach with some evident advantages where sports practice offer a straight line direction towards a better health. In the second part, allow me to ask for your attention towards the potential dangers that can occur in some circumstances of sports practice. And having described the large panorama of advantages and inconveniences, let's propose to you some themes. These themes prove to be to better the health and the physical ability of our communities around the globe. And finally, the idea will be to reach a statement that may be or might be even surprising to some. So public health and sports that we will link into diversity are two very important pillars in the construction of a better human society. Should each of them remain isolated with their own challenges, their own specificities, or on the contrary, should we bring these two important factors together with the ambition that sports would be helpful in obtaining a better overall mental and physical health? This health insight, would it allow for a better performance, a more social well-being in the interest of global human harmony? Let's go to history. We can learn a lot from that. It teaches us that the practice of sports has linked up as an excellent method to improve the physical condition and prevent cure illnesses. Already, our medical great mentor Hippocrates lectured on the preservation of health through regular exercise. And also in the letters of the grand philosopher of the Greek antiquity, Aristotle, you can read the importance that he gives to an adequate physical condition. Consequently, although we have reference of ball sports and games way before the Greek civilization, it's not surprising that the first well-known sports event reference is situated in Greece, namely in the year -767 of modern counting. And this was the moment whereby the first Olympic Games of the antique times were organized. In fact, this was essentially a religious meeting, honoring the main Greek god Zeus, with only one single category called the dromos. It was a race length representing 600 times the foot of the Zeus. So now, centuries later, sports is described as all forms of physical activity that contribute to physical fitness, mental well-being, and social interaction. Today, in the global human society, sports and physical activity are considered to be important components of people's health. And this is illustrated and proven by researchers and consensuses worldwide. Sports leads now to a better understanding and a better physical condition of that. It increases the muscle power, it enhances a more balanced lifestyle, and improves the quality of sleep. So this is what we know, but it also decreases the excessive medical consumption, reduces the risks of conditions like cardiovascular disease, obesity, osteoporosis, chronic illnesses, cerebral attacks, and hypertension. Many of these topics, of which Well Cornell is at the forefront in research and guiding us all in how to proceed. We link that to sports. And thanks to the practice of regular sports, the risk of early death decreases by 30%, 30. This evidence is out there. It's all methodologically well done, and it's academically approved as the new knowledge. On top of that, sports improves mental well-being features such as self-confidence, social skills, and psychological balance. An important voice is the one from Ban Ki-moon, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, who quoted in a larger context, "Sports are increasingly recognized as important tools in helping the United Nations achieving its objectives. By including sports into the development and peace programs of the United Nations in a more systemic way, they can make full use of this proven cost-effective tool in order to create a better world, in order to improve the lives of different people around the world, and to build bridges between individuals and across communities." Diversity, right? So, sports leads to what? The projects that focus on health outcomes, they emphasize on the promotion of a healthy lifestyle, choices among children and young people, as well as adults to combat inactivity. The use of sports as a tool to raise awareness on communicable diseases, mainly in developing countries, and the contribution to achieve on mental health objectives, including addressing depression and stress-related disorders. And during the last decades, statistics from the so-called developed countries have shown a dramatic decline in the level of physical activity in people's daily lives. For a majority of these people, physical activity is limited to work, domestic activity, transportation, and leisure. Whilst specific health risks differ between countries and regions, the essence remains that physical activity and inactivity is a major risk factor for the most common non-communicable diseases, and physical activity can counteract many of the ill effects of inactivity. So here we are, in a little introduction, dear friends, considering all these positive effects of sports practice towards individuals and communities, towards prevention of illnesses, towards better mental well-being, towards a better social integration, towards the multiple negative effects of inactivity, we could be convinced that sports can only have a positive effect on public health. But is that so? The dangers of sports practice in relation to public health have been quoted by the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Winston Churchill. One day, he had to answer a question about his remarkable physical resilience and condition. His answer was short: never sports. He smoked a cigar, had a whiskey, and remained in an excellent physical condition. Another day, he qualified a tournament of golf as the disruption of a nice walk in the park. He forgot, however, to mention that he walked hereby for more than 1 hour a day himself, every day. Nevertheless, it is true that sports practice doesn't have only advantages when considering overall public health. And this is essentially visible when we consider competitive and professional sports practice, much less for sure when we remain on recreational grounds. And the predominantly negative effects of sports practice on our health concerns different categories. One of the most important themes or sectors that we want to have, as I mentioned in the beginning, 3 in total, would be the one that I am more active in, which is the orthopedic sector. Let's look into it. 2 other sectors would be the cardiological one and the neurological one. So when we look at the orthopedic one, 2 generations ago, a football knee was synonymous for a meniscus lesion, leading mostly to the extirpation in total of a meniscus by surgery. And I have to apologize already to you, because most of the medical field linked to sports and diversity in line with that will be linked to football. And that is just because it's more the bread and butter of our daily practice. But many of it can be extrapolated to other different individual and team sports. Anyway, that football knee, 1 generation later, when sports practice has become much more intense, the football knee became a more complex gathering of meniscus and ligamentous injuries with a major focus on preservation as much as possible of the native tissue. And today, in a period where elite athletes have to perform up to 90 times a year a top-level performance, the football knee has become a dramatic surcharge on the cartilage, leading to career-endangering, isolated, and multiple cartilage lesions. So that whole spectrum has changed, has evolved. And when you talk to legend athletes, and luckily in Qatar, especially with the World Cup coming, we see a lot of them. They say in our time, and we're talking about 1 generation ago, they played 40 games a year. And that was the total amount with World Cup, National League, National Cups involved altogether. Now it's up to 90. Now, not only that, the intensity of the game has changed. And by that, surcharge has become one of the most frequent diagnoses in our practice, a signature and consequence of the increasing economical pressure, leading to every year more national level and international level World Cups, Olympic competitions, and so on. You have seen that, for example, the people at the governing body of football, FIFA, have proposed to do a World Cup every 2 years. And actually, the medical contras against that have been taken well, and it has been put off the table because of the surcharge. The athlete-centered principles have to remain sacred. And the result of all this surcharge in medical terms has given one primary victim in what we call the hunting ground, and that is the cartilage. So that is from the orthopedic point of view, but you're all aware of the 2 other themes. And another serious problem as one of these 3 is affecting the health problem and sports practice as the so-called sudden cardiac death issue. Now, this is not at all the most frequent, but certainly the most dramatic incident in the world of sports. And this is for multiple reasons. First of all, a cardiac arrest on the field, it concerns always a young athlete, which obviously presents as a contra-natural drama. It concerns, secondly, essentially young athletes that serve as role models, that are a symbol of health and top performance for a whole generation. And third, and finally, these dramatic incidents enter directly into our social media, TV channels, and so on, with a massive visual and sensitive witnessing exposure. But what do we do precisely mean by sudden cardiac death? Now, it can be a bit sensitive to see this video, so please don't look if you don't want to watch it, but just to have an idea on when you watch television, what can happen. Look at the left side of your screen. This is a young person in a sudden cardiac arrest. Luckily, he survived. But it is basically about an unexpected death from cardiac origin within 1 hour after the outbreak of some symptoms in a young athlete that was completely negatively screened by prior cardiovascular history taking and pathology screening by the best experts in the world. And this diagnostic definition excludes cerebrovascular, respiratory, or traumatic reasons, or underlying conditions due to medication intake. So the most predominant cause of sudden cardiac death in athletes aged older than 35 years is coronary obstruction. In younger athletes, however, we find more diverse spectrum of cardiovascular pathologies, especially cardiac arrhythmias that are provoked by what we call ventricular hypertrophy. And that is part of the whole cardiomyopathy scene. But also other cardiac issues can cause sudden cardiac death in our young athletes. And emerging research shows that an infection that causes myocarditis or pericarditis can be responsible. And this is actually a very hot topic for us for the moment, in line with elite performance and COVID-19 infections and vaccinations. I can tell you that our situation during COVID with return to play for all our QSL and all our other athletes and federations have given a huge amount of emotional and difficult task to us to guide that in the right way. There were some concerns about having more sudden cardiac death chance while having had the vaccination within 3 weeks after. And a lot of evidence was emerging, but not fully confirmed yet. So we had to put it all on board, not only with our national, but also international network, to find the right ways, not only to do it safe, but also evidence-based and logic in respect to the fact that sports practice wanted to regain, but in a way that we could at least serve a patient-centered and athlete-centered focus. So here we are, sudden cardiac arrest. Furthermore, and very sadly, there remains a limited dark zone, whereby the etiology of such dramas remain unknown, despite valuable evidence-based guidelines. I'm sure many of you who like football have seen the dramatic, luckily with a good outcome, incident of Eriksson, a player from Denmark in the last European national leagues. And some epidemiological data of interest about sudden cardiac death are that it's 1 out of 50,000 athletes competing worldwide. The age of 23 years old is most frequent, and 40% of cases are under the age of 18 years old. And the male-female ratio is 9:1. The risk of sudden cardiac death is 2.8 times higher in athletes compared to a more sedentary population. And the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is diagnosed 5 times more in people from the black race compared to others. And this problem remains very serious and requires all our ongoing attention, since worldwide, every week, 12 young people under the age of 35 years old, unfortunately, still die nowadays because of an undiagnosed cardiac problem. We had our surcharge in orthopaedics, the sudden cardiac death theme in cardiology, and the third one is the neurological one. We are confronted with another serious problem in football, namely that one of concussion, particularly active, coming from the American football and rugby scene. In American football only, we find up to 200 serious concussions in their leagues per year. And when we extrapolate that to soccer, to football, 2 important questions rise up. When we talk about concussion, the first one is heading at young age. Some theories proclaim that heading should not be part of training until the age of 14, which is the age that entitles the full maturity of the brain. Others say you should start very early and teach an appropriate technique of heading and solid development of the neck musculature. The large number of neurodegenerative lesions in older professional athletes after their career lead to early presentations of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. In concussion, there is a functional disturbance that leads to skills impairment, slow reaction time, lack of concentration, and bad decision making. Now, the best example to explain this condition is the case of Liverpool's goalkeeper Loris Karius. That has been in the final of the Champions League in Kiev. I don't know if many of you remember, but on the left you see he had this minor concussion in contact with the player. After that, he completely lost everything that he is good at, and that is because of that concussion. But it was not diagnosed at the time, and the team lost. So note that the player seems to be okay, but he's not. Was it a spectacular trauma? No, it looks as a normal collision that happens all the time during these games. And are these goals a consequence of slow reaction time, bad decision making? Well, I leave it to you, but at the end, they lose the Champions League final. And so we are obliged to conclude that competitive sports also contain multiple dangers in different themes, the orthopedic one, the cardiological one, and the neurological one, especially when you look at it from a holistic point of view to the whole human body. And then we come to the aspect of the people's diversity. Regardless of the medical or paramedical message that we just addressed, we want to talk about gender equality, harassment, and abuse in sports. Harassment and abuse in sports can affect anyone, with elite athletes, children, players with disabilities, LGBTQ+ athletes being amongst all of those that are basically at higher risk. Similarly, anyone can be a perpetrator. However, male-dominated gender ratios in sport have been evidenced. They are the evidence of a risk factor, a higher risk factor, and studies have indicated that a higher percentage of perpetrators of interpersonal violence in sports are male. When considering grassroots participation, for example, women and girls may overwhelmingly face challenges related to access. These have been broadly grouped as practical and personal, but also social and cultural. So practical, such as access to facilities, safe transport, funding, childcare, personal safety in and around the sports and community venues. The personal ones, such as clothing and equipment, and the social and cultural ones, including gender constructs, attitudes, prejudices around sexuality, disability, ethnicity, and dropout due to harassment and abuse. This adds to the abundance of reasons why, when looking to cultivate a safe and inclusive environment in and through sports and football in particular, it is essential to consider access and opportunity for women and children, but also girls, adolescent girls, from the pitch to the boardroom of that people's game. And the IOC consensus statement on harassment and abuse in sports has been very helpful since 2016 implemented, that identified 5 forms of harassment and abuse in sports and gave it a name: psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and neglect. And these forms of harassment and abuse may occur in combination or in isolation, can be one-off event or series of incidents, and may occur in person or online. Harassment and abuse stems from real and perceived power differentials and is rooted in discrimination, be that related to gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, age, socioeconomic and financial status, athletic ability, faith, etc. So harassment and abuse in all its forms are widespread and pervasive. Data demonstrates that across their lifetime, 1 out of 3 women are subjected to physical and sexual violence, and this does not include sexual harassment. And these figures have led the WHO Director General to comment that violence against women is endemic in every country and culture, noting that this has only been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And further research indicates that at least 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual abuse or assault, whether in childhood or as adults around the sports environment. International studies reveal that nearly 3 in 4 children aged between 2 and 4 years regularly suffer from physical punishment and psychological violence at the hands of sports caregivers. So even at very young age, whether it's parents or caregivers, this is happening. And whilst there is no conclusive evidence demonstrating that abuse occurs more often in sports than elsewhere, There are factors which may increase risk within sport, including reward structure centering on a win-at-all-cost mentality, the hierarchical nature of sports, the lack of protection policies and access to effective remedy, the institutional scandal avoidance, and unbalanced gender ratios. And that is not just in football. You can see that in gymnastics, as you have seen in the latest Olympic Games, and so on. And then we come to the racism in sports theme. Sports has many powerful societal benefits, including fostering a sense of belonging, solidarity, teamwork, and community. And despite this, it may also reveal deeply embedded discriminatory undertones within our society. Incidents of racial abuse in sports are not uncommon and sadly continue to be on the rise. The latest statistics from Kick It reported racial abuse in professional football that has risen from 53% from the 2018 season to 2019 season in 53%. So regardless of the impact of COVID-19. In Italy, for example, statistics from the Observatory on Racism in Football found that there were 249 racist incidents in stadiums from 2011 till 2016. And in 2017 to 18 season alone, there were 60 reported incidents. Footballers are not only targeted on the pitch. Social media has given perpetrators a new avenue to reach and abuse the biggest names in sports while granting them a perceived sense of anonymity. Between 17 and 26th of June 2020, the Professional Footballers Association and different entities found that 43% of Premier League players had experienced racist abuse on Twitter. And data collected by the English Premier League to monitor the issue of online harassment against players in 2021 suggested that 70% of the profiles of perpetrators, they belong to people outside of the United Kingdom, demonstrating the international scope of online abuse. And whilst efforts are being made to tackle this behavior, including education and social campaigns and organizational responses in the form of sanctions, it is important to recognize racial inequality within the wider ecosystem of football itself. Addressing racism in football will take more than legal, judicial, and disciplinary measures. Whilst these are necessary and should be applied consistently, properly addressing racism in football requires continued vigilance from every individual involved in the sport, from the tops of football organizations to fans watching at home. Diversity and inclusion strategies which recognize and counters historical, social, cultural prejudice, they must be embedded across all levels of sports. As they say, tackling racism in football involves confronting institutional racism, systemic prejudice, toxic behaviors, and unconscious biases across society for the change within and beyond the sport. And then we come to the mental health and well-being. When looking at the welfare of football players, it's crucial to discuss the intersectionality with mental health and well-being and the importance of caring for mental health with the same considerations as physical health that we did before. In a study on mental health in elite footballers, researchers found a 4-week prevalence of symptoms of common mental disorders. And this was ranging from 9% for adverse substance abuse to 38% of anxiety and depression. A 12-month incidence ranged from 12% for distress to 37% for anxiety and depression again. And in recent years, we have seen many footballers speak up about mental health challenges that they faced both during their sports careers and following their transition out of the elite competition. Now, the stressors in today's game are wide and varied and include biological, psychological, social, sport-specific, career-related stresses. And yet conversations concerning mental health and well-being are often shrouded in stigma, with players encountering a number of barriers to help, to seeking help, including lack of problem awareness, scared of what might happen, impact on ability to play and train, and difficulty or unwillingness to express emotion, not sure how to reach out or who to reach out to, and accessibility to sport, to support in the sport, and believe that it would not help. So athletes, they experience mental health symptoms and disorders at similar levels to the wider society. And normalizing conversations around mental health, recognizing its importance to well-being and supporting, help in establishing pathways to care to all athletes, but also sends an important and positive message to those for whom athletes are as an important role model. And if we want to propagate or are to propagate a holistic approach to athlete welfare, we must recognize that mental and physical well-being are two halves of a whole. So, what are the measures that the world of sport should take to improve the athlete's health? Everything starts with prevention. When we want to discuss the relation between public health, sports, and celebrating its diversity in many themes, one of the most important aspects will always be prevention. We accept that the practice of sports within certain limitations and adapted to the individual conditions of each athlete is beneficial. And it was actually Einstein who said that the man is like a bicycle. He must be in motion to keep its balance. And this is true for the different disciplines of recreational sports, where prevention is already an important factor. But we have to consider hereby also adequate equipment, a well-adapted training method, and prevention of the mentioned surcharge. And it's particularly true in professional sports, whereby prevention of this orthopaedic, cardiac, and neurological theme surcharge is an absolute necessity to be avoided or at least to be limited. It is well known that athletes have to endure social, economical, and national pressure to win, sometimes at all costs, which results in ethical and health problems. Today, there is a clear focus in sports medicine on the treatment and rehabilitation of the injured athlete, but neither the prevention of injuries nor the recurrence of injuries is given a high priority still today. The first major step in the prevention of injuries was taken by the American President Theodore Roosevelt in 1905, where he addressed the American College to adjust the rules in American football to eliminate the risks. And rule changes such as introduction of helmets and face masks in ice hockey, head guards and mouth guards in boxing, and so on have reduced the injury incidence dramatically, as did also the obligation to wear shin guards in soccer, for example. Actually, many injuries can be prevented with protective equipment that acts on some of the most important extrinsic variables in their sport, by changing the rules in sports, with the primary intention to offer maximum protection to our athletes. Some football examples are the red card in soccer for tackling from behind, or for an elbow kick in the face, by avoiding overuse injuries, thanks to more tailored and adequate training methodology. And all these changes also can be injuries related to sport-specific issues like the tennis elbow, the jumper's knee, the football turf toe, and so on, whereby every sports modality needs to be analyzed for injury mechanism and risk. Now, finally, we also have to examine the difference surrounding factors around the practice of sports, and allow me to address you some examples. The adaptation to jet lag, whereby an acclimatization period is mandatory, depending on the different time zones. The second is the performance on high altitude, whereby adaptation periods are necessary prior to performing elite level activities. Some examples are, for example, football stadiums in South America that are situated 3,000 meters above sea level. A third one is the sports practice in extreme climatological conditions, such as cold or heat. And this is, of course, very accurate now with the World Cup coming to Qatar, where the medical department of the governing football body has advised not to play during the normal June-July period, because climatological conditions in Qatar summer, with temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius and more, not only would affect players' performance, but also the officials, the media, the tourists, the spectators. And finally, we need to unfortunately consider more and more the effects of pollution. This was particularly active in a recent youth tournament in India, where periods of dramatic air pollution made the organization of the competition actually impossible. And a last serious problem in relation to public health, sports, and having a diversity in competition is obviously the use of doping. It's unacceptable for many reasons. It's against the ethics of sports, it's against the integrity of our competitions, and above all, for us medical and allied healthcare providers, it has a negative effect on health. It can seriously have an effect and have a negative effect, even up towards casualties. And we're all aware of the serious negative impact of doping products on the health of our athletes. It all started with amphetamines, corticoids, testosterone, anabolics, diuretics, and other substances, leading to human health disasters. And the world reacted when bicycle racer Tom Simpson died on the French Mont Ventoux Alps during the Tour de France, July 13, 1967, due to an overdose on anabolic steroids, and later entered the scene of the new generation doping products, such as erythropoietin and somatotropic hormone derivatives. Nowadays, the new kid on the block is the genetic doping, with all its intrinsic issues around values and traceability. We believe that everybody concerned about athlete health, all of us together, should remain very strict and say clearly and loudly no to doping. And in conclusion, dear friends, yes, public health and sports can walk together hand in hand, whereby the practice of sports and function, they are important tools for the athletes, for health, but also for the wider human society, happiness, well-being, mental and physical. And however, all sorts of orthopaedic, cardiac, and neurological surcharge, especially in the competitive sports scene, they clearly affect the health of our athletes. A lot remains to be done in the area of prevention, treatment, adaptation, doping fight, and so on, to offer the world of sports a better and intrinsically safer future. And just allow me a personal note as a conclusion. My life has so far always been a challenge in two sectors. One is as an orthopedic surgeon, the care for our patients, a sports lover, the fact that we see that sports builds bridges and brings people together, a better understanding between people from different backgrounds, skin color, religion, political convictions, thanks to our common love of the sport. But the nicest word for a football match, for example, for me is the French word, la rencontre, a meeting around the ball of all these different people celebrating around sports. This is the way to move forward in life together, to create joy in life together, and eventually build a better world and a better health together, celebrating that diversity within sports as the catalyzer through sports. And that's, in a nutshell, what I wanted to share with you. Now, the three themes from the medical point of view, and then the issues around mental health, around all the other topics of doping, around the unfortunate existing harassment, abuse, racial inequality around sports, is nothing different than what society offers, but it has its sport-specific meaning. And we always say that sports open doors that sometimes are always closed. And that's where sport can act as a catalyzer towards a better future for our youngsters, our athletes, and our overall society. Because the athletes, we call them as the showroom, but the real population has to benefit from the same. And that is, in a nutshell, a little word on how we perceive the celebration of diversity in sports on different teams, but also the dangers around that intrinsically are there as well. So back to you, Madam Raji and Dr. Sohaila.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Again,
Pieter.
thank you so much. And we appreciate what you've done for us today. Thank you.
And warmest salutations to you and your beautiful global community. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for the invite.
Thank you.
And so assalamu alaikum and goodbye for now. Thank you.